Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where us four backlog boys look at every single Best Picture winner and we try to figure out where they go on a great big list of the Best Picture winners ranked. It's the Quest for the Bestest. My name is Timo, of course, joined by Tucker, Tanner, and Abram. And if you notice something a little different in the background and sound, I am away on some study abroad right now. I'm over in Britain, even though we make so many jokes about the British not really being people. I'm here, and I've retained my personhood. I can't believe it. But none of that is important. None of that is important because this week we are talking about On the Waterfront from 1954, directed by Elia Kazan. We've seen another movie by this director, Gentleman's Agreement, if you recall. I am really excited to talk about this film. It was a while ago, but it's a film that sticks in our minds quite well. And I guess we'll just have to see if On the Waterfront sticks in our minds as well as the previous Best Picture winner from Mr. Kazan did. Now, we got to talk about this film quite a bit. I really want to discuss what happens. Of course, Marlon Brando's in this film. There's a whole lot else to discuss. But before we get there, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. Last week, we talked about The Sting from 1973. And even though maybe some of us were a little trepidatious as we came into the episode, we came out of it pretty hot. Gave it an average score of 8.6, which landed it on the 24th spot on our list. Pretty high up there. So, On the Waterfront coming up right after someone delivers a comment of the week. Who's got it?
Okay, so for this week, we actually got a comment from someone new, but someone who is dear to my heart. We got a comment from Sam Meltzer, who hosts another Oscars podcast, the Oscar Doesn't Go To podcast, which I was a guest on, and he says, "Love this review. Fun fact, The Sting is the most recent film to not receive a Best Picture nomination at the Globe and BAFTAs to win Best Picture at the Oscars. However, it was still a fairly expected winner. The Exorcist, which did extremely well with critics and precursor awards, was far too controversial and unconventional to win Best Picture. Also, The Sting was a major box office smash and crowd pleaser. Also note that A Touch of Class, a forgotten film, received a Best Picture nomination and is commonly viewed as one of the worst and strangest nominees. I, however, see it as a guilty pleasure."
Wow, okay. Yeah, very elucidating.
Comment.
Little trivia in a featured comment. Whoa.
Wow.
I love
Incredible. Okay, well, how many of you have seen this film before? I forget. We talked about this at the end of last episode. Tucker, you've seen it. Tanner, you've seen it.
This is my first time.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I want to start with you, Abram. What did you think of On the Waterfront?
I think this movie is exactly what I expected Quest for the Bestest to be before we started. And what I mean by that is I had this sort of, when we were beginning the show, I had this like idyllic idea that every week we would watch a film and it was going to feel timeless and it was going to feel well acted and well executed and up to the level of quality that I think of when I think of a Best Picture. Mm-hmm. In actuality, I honestly don't think that's what this crop of films has turned out to be, as we've talked about. But to me, this really does feel like the archetypal Best Picture. Really well written, really well shot, really well acted, really interesting narrative. I think this movie is quite excellent. I was a huge fan of On the Waterfront.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
High praises from the first-time viewer.
Yeah, I had the same sort of notion when I watched this the first time, and it did not shrink from those praises on a rewatch. On the Waterfront is a great movie. For all the reasons you stated there, Abram, obviously Marlon Brando is great in this movie. Even Ava Marie Saint is also fantastic in her. I think almost a first-time performance from her. I don't know if she was established.
First time, I believe.
First time. I think she does get an introducing in the credits of this film. But she's great as well. You know, she won best supporting actress. You got Elia Kazan, who's one of the all-time 50s, 30 or not 30s, but this era of
directors.
All sorts of eras. He's one of the directors of all time in many ways, and this is one of the movies of all time. You know, and it certainly lives up to those expectations, which some other films on this list may not have. But so I'm excited to talk about On the Waterfront.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Tucker,
I'm
you
excited
want
to
to go
talk about. I'm excited to talk about On the Waterfront as well, because I think this is a very good movie as well. I honestly don't have any criticisms about it, but this is the second time I saw it, and it was basically the first time I saw it, because frankly, I didn't remember anything about this movie going in. Obviously, Marlon Brando, I knew he was in it, I knew it was about the mob, but I've never found it to be particularly memorable on that first watch, stays about the same now. It's been about 4 days since I saw this, and I almost can't remember a single thing about it, which I think is not necessarily a testament to its quality or anything, but just it doesn't really feel special to me. This film doesn't stick out. I think it is obviously iconic. It's very influential. I think it's one of the top examples of a film of this style from that era. But I think I've just seen these topics covered better in more interesting ways with more complex characters. I think it is a very good movie, but it kind of just feels like what everyone was saying, sort of the baseline of what I expect a good movie that wins Best Picture to be, and not much more than that.
Okay. Well, I think this was about the third time I've seen this movie. The first time was at the Paramount in Austin, back home. And today I watched it after an early morning meeting, dead tired, expecting to really have to pull myself through the film. But it really just pulled me right in from the beginning, and I was enthralled, and I was ready to watch what happened and remember who are these characters, what do they want, what is going on in the plot. And I am pretty much in agreement. I think that we have some really, really stellar acting. It's kind of a no-brainer from Marlon Brando that this is some amazing performances, but I think he outshines everyone else on screen when he is really giving it all. I do disagree with the politics of the film, but it's like a disagree, not like a I find fault. I think that this film has an interesting situation within like American cinema history in its, as in 1954, I'll explain later, Red Scare. Just think about Red Scare and McCarthyism as we discuss about this film. But to me, that's like not a discount against it. That's just another aspect of everything that is going on in this movie. I find it really enjoyable. It really just moves along. Before I knew it, the film was done, and I was like, oh, yeah, what another great film. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Timo, I do have some Red Scare related trivia when we roll around to it. So and it's interesting, for sure. There are lots of interesting trivia for this movie as well.
This is the scariest movie we've watched for Quest of the Bestest.
I agree. Yeah, it could have been The Exorcist, but no, they decided against that last week.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
It's a yucky movie.
Where do we want to start with On the Waterfront? Should we start with one of the legendary actors and Best Actor winner for this film, Marlon Brando?
I think that that's the best place to start for this film because, like I said, he's a tentpole. He holds this film up so much. Just his performances is so convincing. It's that new style, that method acting, the Marlon Brando technique that I think really comes across very strongly in this film in ways that in others, Streetcar Named Desire, I didn't quite get into that film, but this one, I really get into his character. I really feel him a lot. And yeah, I enjoyed Marlon Brando as, what's his name again? I can't remember.
Terry.
Terry.
Yeah,
Terry Malloy.
Terry Malloy.
Bogard.
Yeah, that's right.
You get a finger wag from that one.
I agree, Timo. I think Marlon Brando is good for a lot of this movie. Would be a fine Best Actor winner in my opinion. But then there's a point in here where he really just comes alive towards, like, I think around when that third act kicks in, around the time when things are really kicking into gear, when he's meeting with Charlie in that taxi cab. And even a little bit before that, that's where Brando really comes alive in this movie, and he's just stellar through the rest of this film. And that's a good 30-40 minutes of this movie that he is dialing it up to 10 or 11 in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I have a hard time usually noticing acting unless it's really good or really bad, and I've said this before.
Sure.
But I think there's like an even higher echelon of really good acting where you just dissolve into the role. And I don't see Marlon Brando. I see Terry Bogard as I'm watching this film. And I think that is certainly to its benefit. I mean, Marlon Brando, believe it or not, is a fantastic actor, but I don't think of him as Marlon Brando. I think of him as Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. I think of him as the Godfather. And I think of him as Terry, right? And I think that's just a testament to the fact that he's so believable in this role. He moves in a way that you see this character moving. The way he interacts with everybody, that, as you're saying, Tanner, I think that conversation with his brother Charlie is maybe the best scene in the entire film, when he's finally like, it wasn't happenstance, it wasn't the coach that ruined my life, it was you. And this sort of look on his face when the revolver is pulled on him and as their whole relationship begins to unravel, It's just really powerful and really immersive acting.
Yeah, I think that the reason why he shines so bright in this movie, and this is a fantastic performance, obviously, is Terry changes a lot in this movie. I think this is one of the instances where you're watching a character's arc across the movie, and he starts off very surprisingly quiet, but reservedly tough. But he's just so aloof for like the first 2/3 of this movie, and as he starts learning more about the truth of the situation and how he was raised and how the people who raised him aren't that good and that there are other ways to see the world, you can see the fire be lit in his eyes and in the character's motivations to where he does end up being very outward and aggressive near the end in a really strong and confident way. And it's that sort of flip on the head from him being just the most bumfuck guy for like 2/3 of the movie. Everyone's just like, hey, it's Terry. We just give him a couple quarters and we let him go play in the field, and he's a happy little duckling. But then you get to see him be a confident guy who's able to hold his own in multiple fights. And obviously he was a boxer. I'm not saying he's never strong, but his personality definitely becomes a lot stronger.
Yeah, he becomes resolved. He has something to stand for finally in this, instead of just being acted upon, and sort of this pawn in this like mob controlling union sort of chessboard that this movie takes place in.
He's not another fucking bum from Palookaville
No, he's
anymore
not.
by the time
He is not.
and I like that a lot.
Unlike us.
Yeah, we are all bums from Palookaville.
Our
Abram,
own
you
respective
mentioned-
Palookavilles.
Abram, you mentioned the taxi cab scene, which is probably one of the most famous scenes in cinema history. It has one of the I could have been a contender, I could have been somebody instead of some bum from Palookaville, which we were just referencing. But I do have some trivia relating to this scene, because being one of the most famous scenes in cinema, people have written about it, actors have been asked about it, and some interesting stuff has come out. So, Marlon Brando is sort of infamous for being one of the famous and infamous in Hollywood. Sort of this guy who plays by his own rules, and he's sort of a drama queen in many ways. But he might have gotten this reputation unfairly, because in Marlon Brando's contract for this film, it stated that he could leave at 4:00 every day. This led him to not be present for the close-ups of Rod Steiger, who plays Charlie, in that taxi cab scene. Rod Steiger was very hurt by this because he stuck around for Marlon Brando's close-up so they could get that real personal connection in that scene going. But Marlon Brando left during those points. When they were going to shoot Rod Steiger's close-ups, and Steiger always really resented that, and apparently talked about it multiple times in interviews, how he always resented Brando for doing this. But apparently, to Brando's reputation, he was leaving for therapy appointments every day because he had recently lost his mother, and he was trying to get over unresolved issues that he had with his parents. So a little humanization of this larger than life guy is important, I feel.
Sure.
Very interesting. And wow, helps. It certainly helps Brando's stand-up performance in that scene that he was there, that his co-star in that scene was hanging around during the close-ups, because it does matter, I think, on set when actors are bouncing off each other and they're really there in the space performing with each other.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
I think Steiger is also great in that scene and all the other ones, because as we were talking about, he's integral to Terry's whole character arc, where Charlie realizes that he's been at least partially responsible for holding Terry back and keeping him locked in this position where he's beating up dudes for quarters or whatever, as Tucker said, and he hasn't been letting him grow and become his own person, even as he reaches nearly 30 years old, as he apparently is in this movie.
Yeah.
I think what makes him so compelling is his situation in this larger narrative here, because it could have very simply been about this union that's being leaned on by the mob and their relationship, and that's that. But I think putting Brando in the middle there complicates everything in what is honestly a fairly predictable but nonetheless very compelling manner. I mean, pretty early on that he is going to go with Edie and he is going to testify against a family. That's pretty obvious. But nonetheless, I like his position here, with the chip on both shoulders in a way, and watching him come from being that prize fighter to getting screwed over and then having to navigate what is ostensibly a life, like a comfortable life of failure. I think that's an interesting element of the film. The way like he could very easily take any of these offers, be making a lot of money for the time doing nothing, but there's this restlessness about him that I really like, and navigating the political tensions and the social tensions of this waterfront community through his eyes, I think makes for a much more interesting film than what we maybe would have otherwise got.
He's a character kind of, after he meets Edie, he's kind of split between two worlds. After he I don't know if he like awakens to what's really going on within the waterfront. I think it's hard not to really see for any of those characters what is truly happening all the time. But I agree with you, Abram. I think that's really great. I particularly enjoy the way that these elements of his character, the way he is characterized in the film. We don't get all of this information spilled out in the beginning. You know, this comes out throughout the film, and it's as we learn about him, the film progresses and it adds to the complication of him and his, you know, learning in that cab ride that he could have had the other guy. He could have gone for it. He could have been at the championship, been a boxer as a career, been doing what he kind of seemed like he wanted to, or at least seemed like he felt more fulfilled with. And I definitely appreciate that from a writing perspective of the character. The character was felt very natural, and as a person that develops, and we learn about them as the film goes on.
Yeah, it's his development that I mentioned earlier, the arc and the character growth that we see, that I think is fueled by something that I don't honestly hear talked too much about in this movie, but is the supporting cast around them. I consider this an ensemble movie, even though it is very focused on Terry Malloy's story. The amount that you get on all the other characters around him and the actors that he's bouncing off with. Carl Malden, I think, does a fantastic job as Father Barry. Lee J. Cobb, obviously iconic, but as Johnny Friendly, just such a powerhouse. And Eva Marie Saint bringing, like, for a first-time actress, a ton of emotion. And it is when he meets Edie, and not only just meets Edie, but, like, you know, starts to grow sweet upon her and begins to build a human connection that he's obviously been
you want some
lacking
beer,
for.
babe?
That he's obviously been lacking for his entire life, that he's able to become aware. I think you said he not necessarily awakened towards these issues, but I think he's awakened to the fact that they are issues, because he's been so sheltered in a certain perspective his entire life, with everyone around him and supporting him, quote unquote, are the mob, and they're like, this is the right thing to do, and you gotta be tough, and you gotta just stay out of the way, stay quiet. But when he realizes the impact by building a personal bond with someone, that's a really natural growth that we're able to see this character like come to terms with his own reality in a really sobering way. Like, he realizes that he's been a shithead for most of his life.
he's shown like human affection, real human affection and understanding for the first time by Edie, and that is the catalyst for his character arc in the movie, which I really enjoy. The relationship between Terry and Edie is also just really nice for like a 1950s Hollywood movie. A lot of times you're like, okay, it was a different time. I mean, and of course there are some elements of that moments here for sure. But honestly, I do quite enjoy their relationship nonetheless.
Yeah, I think that the film. I was thinking about this as I was watching it. I was like, okay, so we have our A plot, this union story of the corruption on the waterfront. And then we have the romance, but the way that they are tied together and the way that the film like allows the romance to take kind of hold in the early, or I guess the early second act of the film is really just about Terry and Edie's relationship together and how they, you know, connect and bond essentially over this very messed up situation that they kind of both acknowledge. I really think it is quite realistic. It feels about as wholesome as a movie like this could be. They feel nice together, and I think it's a refreshing romance, and one that, you know, I don't really expect from a film like this. I don't expect it to have these feelings of tenderness and support. It's usually a lot more predatory, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, if we're going to be honest, yeah.
Well,
there are moments.
It still certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
I mean, when when he shows up after, because obviously, and I love the sequence when he reveals that he was complicit in her brother's murder, and there's that like overpowering sound design of the train. Timo, it's sound and it's trains.
It's not trains, it's
made
boats,
for
but
that.
it's
It
great.
was a
It's close
boat,
enough.
yeah. Definitely
It's
a boat
steam.
run.
Well, of course,
good.
they're on the waterfront, not on the railway front.
The
That's
train
actually,
front.
You know what, that is actually a really good
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
But after that, when he finally goes back to her after he's met with Charlie and like she won't let him in, so he's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna kick the door down, and then I'm gonna accost her in her hallway and pin her against the wall and kiss her. I'm like, yeah, this would not be written into the narrative today.
Yeah.
But I think otherwise, I agree with you that they do have some nice moments, like when he's trying to guide her out of the club as all, or out of the bar as all the wedding people are coming in. There's a chaos there. Like there's certainly Tucker, as you're saying, that's sort of exposing this tender element of him. But then you get to that one scene. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, I think-
We are
maybe-
still watching a
maybe
movie
he's
from the year
complicated.
from the decade 1950.
Right.
Yeah, I think
Right.
the reason why even something like that, which is obviously a very aggressive moment, doesn't stick out to me as too bad. Though obviously, I don't condone that. I would not do that in real life. But I see Terry's toughness and lack of human interaction. This is him genuinely trying his best to be nice, and like he like in that moment, he thinks the only solution is to do that. And who knows where the movie would have gone or the story would have gone if he hadn't broken down that door and made amends in a very forceful manner. But I do feel like he is being genuine through all of his actions, but also you recognize that yes, he's being genuine, but also he's not socially informed, and he's not a like soft-spoken guy. He's not particularly like understanding,
Romantic,
or romantic. So when he's telling her, oh, just drink a little sip of beer, just drink it, just like, you shouldn't be forcing beer on someone like this. She's not a fan. She doesn't want this, but you can tell that he thinks that like this is the best way forward, and I think that makes him an interesting character to watch, because even though if he, believe it or not, doesn't act the way that we would, like I'm still compelled to watch him work his way through the best he can.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah,
oh,
no,
sorry.
I
Go
agree.
ahead.
I just think that certain sequences betray an older
Yes.
sensibility of filmmaking in these relationships, and that takes me out of the film a little bit when I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I see this scene. I see how this scene plays out.
If there's one element of this film that really brings me in and blankets me in and really tucks me into this narrative, both the romantic and the dramatic elements, it's the score. I mean, Leonard Bernstein's score does a lot of heavy lifting in those romance sequences, that doing these big over the top, really like flowery orchestral pieces over these things, and then over the rest of the movie too. I mean, there's real jazzy, like Zoot Suit kind of vibes over the beginning of the movie, when we're like getting established in this seedy underbelly of whatever city this is. I don't know. I don't really guess. New York, or is it Philadelphia, or is it New York?
It's New York. I don't think
it's New York.
it's not Manhattan, New York, though. It's maybe one of the other boroughs.
But yeah, like the seedy,
It's Waterfront, New York.
mob underbelly, and then that comes out, that sort of same score comes back multiple times. But also I love it in the scenes between Terry and Edie, like when they're arguing. It has this very like driving this very driving score, as these two characters are like having this moment of impassioned argument. Is really interesting. So Leonard Bernstein knocking it out of the park, obviously, with this film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
I think it's very fun that as someone who has seen the other Leonard Bernstein movie, which is West Side Story and West Side Story, and you can feel the musical motifs being repeated here, or
Yes.
like his style is very evident. And I think it's actually kind of a shame that he didn't score more films. Like he scored a couple other ones, but these three are like so clearly at the top of his filmography that I think like I just enjoy his variety as well. I mean, you can feel the big band sort of Broadway feel of this score, but in all sorts of different ways. It's big band, it's high octane energy when it needs to be, but it's also sometimes very quiet, just some simple strings or something like that. And the fact that you can get both of these and they both are equally compelling is Very nice.
Very nice.
Indeed. Now, I think there's one more character that I think is worth mentioning, and that would be Father Barry, which played by
Yes.
Carl Malden. Had to look that one
Yeah.
up. He has a couple just really, really great speeches throughout the film. I think there's two of them in the church before the church is attacked by the mob, and then in the hold of the ship as
Yes.
after what's his name, Dugan is killed. I think that those are some of the he's almost like he mentions conscious quite a bit, but he is kind of the conscious of the film, and I feel like those performances really like drive me into feeling the same feelings that Marlon Brando like should be feeling, and they're invigorating. They're just good speeches and very well delivered monologues.
Yeah.
I think the reason they work for me so well is not only because they are well written and because I think that guy has a lot of presence.
Yeah.
I totally buy that
Especially,
he's the priest. I totally buy it. He's Father Barry.
There's also something I think really commanding about being dressed all in black with incredible cinematography, as I want to talk about. I think the cinematography in this movie is amazing, but it also just helps that the film has a real sense of stakes and weight to it because it is fairly graphically violent, which I was not anticipating. Seeing the blood on the hand when Terry punches through the window, and as he is like it gets worse and worse in the bar, or seeing Charlie all shut up, or even just as simple as seeing like the can thrown at the father's head, and he's bleeding this out of his face as he's giving this speech. Like there's a sense of consequence and violence that underpins everything that happens here, and that just makes these moments feel even more impactful because I'm like, oh my God, he's not going up against the cigar chomping film mob. He's going up against the mob that has a financial interest in this union, and they will kill whoever they have to maintain that financial interest. So I think the film just through its production and design, through everything, establishes this feeling of real weight, which I think helps those scenes.
For sure. I love Father Barry in this movie as well. I think that ship hold scene, excuse me, should maybe surpass that taxi cab scene as one of the best of all time, because that is really powerful stuff. I mean, not the dialogue is obviously fantastic, as Abram said at the beginning. This is a really, really well written movie, and Carl Malden is fantastic in delivering those lines. But I also love like the imagery, again, as Abram mentioned, with the cinematography of like him, standing at the bottom of this ship, with like broken bottles of Irish whiskey and a busted crate at his feet, where a dead man used to be, and then all these other dock workers are like sitting up in the rafters, and they're standing up at the top of the ship hold on the actual deck of the ship, looking down, and that's where the mob boss is as well. Johnny Friendly is up there as well, and they're sort of like they're just shaking their heads as this priest is giving like this impassioned speech about like how long are you all going to take this tyrannical rule by crime in your community. How long are you going to let this happen? And you just stand idly by as they kill your friends and steal your money and stuff like that. It's really, really great. I have some more Marlon Brando trivia. I realize we kind of moved off Marlon Brando as an actor, but if we're wrapping up sort of the performances side of this, there is just some more interesting Brando trivia, and this also relates to Elia Kazan as well.
All right.
So going back to the taxi cab scene, like I said, I got lots of trivia there. Apparently, Marlon Brando would try to improvise and ad-lib stuff in that taxi cab scene, to which Elia Kazan would yell, "Stop the shit, buddy." That's just a fun thing that was happening on set.
Sounds kind of like we would say.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing about the taxi cab scene, producer Sam Spiegel, is that how you pronounce it? He's one of the classic producers of this era. He did like Lawrence of Arabia,
Bridge on the River Kwai. He did most of the David Lean movies.
Yeah. He apparently forgot to pay for rear projection equipment for the day. So that's why I didn't notice this, but the curtains are all drawn on the taxi cab because they didn't pay for rear projection equipment.
Well, doesn't really make much of a difference. You're not focusing on
Wouldn't
that.
look bad too.
Yeah.
You're right, Abram.
If we may
Yes.
though, let's linger on cinematography for a moment though, because you brought it up a second
Yes.
ago, and I think it's so beautiful. Now, some of the cinematography tries to get symbolic and becomes a little bit on the nose, like literally having Terry like in the pigeon coop as he's talking about his sort of status in the community, which again is certainly a little bit heavy fisted, but I still think it works nicely. And then there are just some beautifully composed shots. I mean, you're totally right about the being on the boat. You know, there's a real sense of scale. Like we look up at where the ship door is open to bring the cargo crane down, and really again it's symbolic. You're in the belly of the beast down here, right? And you get all the guys leering at you from above. So I just think that it is so intentionally shot. And, you know, we watch a lot of pretty movies on Quest for the Bestest. You know, we get things like a King's Speech that's shot nicely. Maybe that tries a couple things here and there, but this is just so intentionally framed, and there's so much meaning behind where the camera is placed, and I just love the ways that shots move. You know, the camera's not especially dynamic for a lot of the movie, but it just knows where to sit, and it knows where to frame that really cleverly. So I was just continually impressed. Frankly, I haven't been impressed by the cinematography of a Quest film in a little while. So
yeah, I think that for me, it's not necessarily the cinematography that does it. Well, I do think it is very good, and the black and white I think absolutely gives it a depth that it would, I think, might lack in color. But it's the sets, it's the variety of sets that they are filming in, and of course the camera being placed in certain angles. Of course, you know, it adds dramatic effect to them. But seeing him in a pigeon coop on a roof like that I've never seen that kind of situation in a movie before. And like the idea of not only just having the scene take place on a ship, but a ship that has this giant hole in the top of it, like and you're not only looking from the bottom up just to see these people standing over the top, but like you're at a low angle watching Father Barry give this speech. So like there's this combination of the sets and their symbolic stuff, which I never really felt was ham-fisted. Like I think him being a pigeon breeder / racer is one of the more interesting aspects of the movie that, of course, never really touched upon, but it gives him like a personality, human element, but also makes for a really interesting set. I think the most impressive shots and most interesting shots, at least for me in this movie, are the ones of just looking out across the rooftops and seeing the smokestacks and the not TV antennas because it didn't have TV then, but like the antenna, the stuff on top of the roofs, like all of that. I think
weather vanes.
I don't think so. Not on top of an apartment building. That wouldn't be particularly useful.
And,
but
the pigeon coop thing is also thematically relevant. Of course, it's pretty clear what that Terry is the pigeons. You know, he's cooped up and he can't fly free for fear of being attacked by the hawks, the mob. So I think it all works there. Maybe it is a little heavy-handed, but people were stupid in the 1950s, so it needed to be.
You know, I didn't notice those elements the first time I watched it, and so on rewatch I did. I picked it up, especially this time. I think it threads the needle. I think it's clear, but I think it's applicable and it makes sense. And so it's not heavy-handed, but like I don't think there's any mistaking what it's trying to say about Terry and the pigeons.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's a real heartbreaking moment, I think, when Terry returns to find all of his pigeons dead. And like he just sits down and just says, "What do you do that for?" And he's like holding this dead bird. And for a guy that puts up this facade, even if we see the facade kind of lower a little bit, that's such a genuine moment that even if I think it's a little bit hokey that he's having the conversation with the police detective between chicken wire, right? I don't really care in the end because you're right, Timo. I think it's clear in its messaging and it facilitates these nice emotional moments.
I also love that. I love that moment too when he's talking to the police detective because it sort of proves this point that Terry, for the complexity that we've talked about with his character and his character arc, he's a simpleton. I guess is how I'd put it.
He's a simple guy. Yeah,
he's a simple guy and people use that to sort of influence him, as has been the case for the first 20-some years of his life. But in this film, we get to see it used in interesting ways, like with the police detective, who's very clearly like, tell me a little bit about your boxing career. And Terry's just like outpouring all these like facts and stories and stuff like that. So
it's not only that he's outpouring, it's that he just flips on a dime to like being super passionate about it. It's like, this is obviously his one-track mind for like most of his life, that someone's like, hey, didn't I see you fight? He's like, oh yeah, I did fight,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I could have won, but man, I hit him with the right, and I hit him with the left, and it's like,
and here's
boom.
here's this crime I was implicated in when I did it as well. But I also love towards the end. I love the ending of this movie, by the way. When he gets the fucking shit kicked out of him by Johnny Friendly and his dumb gang. I love Johnny Friendly's dumb gang, especially the one guy there's a guy who looks like if a gorilla was transformed into a man, and there's another guy who just says definitely, like that's his whole bit is he says definitely like a couple of times. They're great, but Terry's got the shit kicked out of him by these guys, sort of like behind this floating houseboat office thing. And Father Barry goes down there, and he recognizes that Terry is a symbol for the rest of these dock workers. He's like, this guy if we're going to enact change here, this guy got the shit kicked out of him, but he needs to get up, walk across this pier, and go to work. Otherwise, this whole thing was for naught. So to get that done, he leans down to Terry and says, Johnny Friendly is laying down odds that you won't walk. And then he clambers to his feet and he shuffles over there. Great moment. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, you just remind me of that whole last scene. That last sequence is the sequence that sticks into my mind. When I started watching the film again, I was like, oh, I'm in for a treat, because at the end awaits just a truly great couple minutes of cinema. The beat down, the way everyone is reacting, I don't know, it's like an everybody clapped moment, except it just feels so earned and it feels so right that I don't care that everybody essentially claps at the end. That like, yeah, of course they would. That makes so much sense.
Sometimes it's okay to have a Hollywood ending where the bad guys lose and they get embarrassed and thrown into the ocean or whatever. Sometimes that's pretty good.
Here
it
it
works
works
a little
really
bit
well.
cartoonish in those moments. Like we've got all these guys just standing there looking downtrodden, and that's their. I mean, obviously that's what their life has led them to. They're in a terrible situation, but that's their bit. They're just the guys that stand there in a huge crowd and look downtrodden. But like all of these like thematic moments that I think could feel cheesy end up feeling fine. Personally, I don't feel like super emotional when I'm watching that. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. This does feel right. But it's not one of the sequences that stands out to me. Maybe because it is kind of obvious and Hollywoody. But I do like showing the inspiration that Terry has found, inspirational position that Terry has found himself in, and pushing to his last limit to go to work for the first time in his life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Timo, I know you mentioned you wanted to talk politics a little bit. I usually like to keep politics out of my movies.
It always goes great at Quest.
Yeah. Usually I like to keep politics out of my movies. You know, most of the movies that we talk about here are obviously not political. But
No way.
This one wouldn't reveal what they were.
Exactly. This one does have some interesting political background to it. If you want me to talk a little bit about that, just to lay the groundwork a little bit, Timo.
Go right ahead. I am interested to hear what you say, because I talked about this film in a class of mine, and we compared it with a film that is similar and antithetical in its politics.
Yes.
But I want to hear what you've got, what you pulled up.
So the famous blacklisted author and writer Arthur Miller was originally set to write the script for this film, but left after he was informed that he was going to have to make the villains of the films communists. So that's an element right there. And on the Waterfront is I didn't know this, but reading the background of this was quite interesting. The film is widely known to be an act of expiation on the part of Elia Kazan for naming names to the House Un-American Activities Committee during the Joseph McCarthy witch hunts in the 1950s. Elia Kazan is sort of infamous for, buckling under the pressure of these investigations and naming a bunch of people who had ties to the Communist Party, or allegedly, or whatever you want to say. It is less widely reported that Kazan intended it as a direct attack at his former close friend Arthur Miller, who had been openly critical of Kazan's actions. Specifically, apparently Arthur Miller had Kazan in mind when he wrote The Crucible, which, if you took a beginning high school English class, you've probably read.
Yes.
Well,
So
half
yes,
of us have
that
it.
is the groundwork. There is this sort of this dispute between Arthur Miller and Elia Kazan with these respective works about each other, essentially.
I hadn't actually heard that before, but the situation that I find this film in is totally in this McCarthyism sphere. This film is so profoundly anti-union. Like, this film essentially in a couple of moments equates all unions to be like this one, to be run by really corrupt people who really exploit the workers who are forced to work underneath them. The film, I think, in this, it like supports itself. It creates a really, really negative picture of labor unions but like in the narrative, it all makes sense. That's why I'm like, I disagree with what it's saying, but like I can't really find fault with it because it makes the film's story work. But the way in which it is so profoundly just like unions are bad and they really don't do a lot good for anyone is. It's not a nuanced take. It's like it is quite reductivist. It's not really founded in it's some, I don't know. It's like a little bit of fact, but like not much.
Here's where I come out of. Here's where I come from, Timo. Because in doing trivia research for this as well, but I'll get to that in a second. I think that because if memory serves, I think Father Barry does have like a line where he says, "And take your union back." So it's more about, wrenching the union from the hands of these corrupt mob guys and giving it back to the workers, which is what unions are all about and why they're actually good. So hot take there. I know. It is, unfortunately, it is kind of a hot take. But on the other hand, this movie is, based on truth. The actual union that the film is based on was busted for mob ties only months after the movie came out.
After, okay.
Yeah, and apparently, like all the main characters in this are also based on real people, which is interesting as well. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. Is that sure? Like in a broad sense, it might seem quite critical in conflating unions with crime, but at the same time, I think there is a pro-union message to be gotten out of this. That we are painting the guys who are manipulating the union for their own financial gain are the villains. And as well as the fact that it's telling a truth of the time is that this is kind of what happened sometimes with these unions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that like once it's expanded, there's a line about like, oh, like you're not going to be able to get work for anywhere on the seaboard from Maine to Florida.
Yeah,
meaning
yeah.
is kind of like it's taking it pretty far. I guess you could say you could maybe extrapolate that from the circumstances in real life, but. It is as with the romance, it is a product of its time. I just don't think the film could have gotten away with anything other than what it does in this time period, especially if Elia Kazan is like trying to bootlick basically the McCarthy and the rest of the Hollywood censors who really wanted to eliminate any of these narratives from films, to really paint unions in this extraordinarily negative picture and to kind of plant. The thing is it's insidious because of this film wins Best Picture and it plants in the minds of everyone that like that unions are corrupt. And while that I think that we have to you say that this specific one is, and thinking about Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters, and yeah, they're pretty corrupt too. Not all of them are like that, and so it's just. I don't know. It's part of this confluence of events that leads to like a downfall in unionization in America. In the decades following, in the 60s and the 70s, when they all kind of fall apart, just because everyone loses the support for them, and media and movies are there. They lead the public in thinking and in telling everyone what to think about whatever. And in this case, it's unions, and they don't tell the public to think favorably.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to like put this in conversation with Miss Miniver or something. Just sort of talking about sort of perhaps the political favorability to some of the films that do win Best Picture. But I think actually maybe I'm just stupid, and this is very possible, but When I think about Miss Miniver, I think that there is zero way to conflate what its political leaning is to the point as we're discussing where it is propaganda. Good propaganda, but nonetheless constructed as propaganda. I don't think that this is quite the same, and frankly, I found myself aligning a little bit more with Tanner's notion of there being some kind of pro-union lining here, in this sort of sense of, because it almost seemed like there needed to be a sense of class solidarity at the end of the film to overthrow big bad Brian, what's his name?
Johnny
Jimmy,
Friendly.
Big
Johnny
Jimmy,
Friendly.
Big Pockets Johnny,
Big
whatever his
Pockets
name
Johnny,
is.
you got it.
To get everybody back to work and to get everybody safely situated on the waterfront, they had to eliminate the people. Yeah, Santa, I said the name of the movie. To eliminate those above them. So, now, I don't think that in any way undercuts what you're saying. I'm not suggesting this is secretly a subversive pro-union film, but I do think that there are readings of it that are not as clear-cut as that. And especially in comparison to some of the other politically driven for their time period, very much in lockstep with what the film just quote unquote should have been expressing. I don't think this one is as clear in that effect.
And I just want to mention that, like, I don't actually think this affects my score at all. I think that this is just an interesting thing to throw in and discuss about the context of the film, because, like I said, I think it kind of needs to be like this. It needs to have these elements to really work as well as it does. I don't think it could have been constructed in a way in which it is I don't really know. I mean, would the evil corrupt people be like the owners of the shipyard or the owners of the docks? Possibly, but I feel like that doesn't have the same effect and the same connection as Jimmy Friendly and the guys controlling the mob, controlling the union does. So I think that it's just how the film is, not really like a bearing on its quality or even my enjoyment of it. I still enjoy the film a lot when I see it, even though I'm kind of just like,
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Sorry, Tucker, did you have something to say? Go for it.
Yeah, I would like.
Sorry.
I think that the reason why the whole storyline works for me, and whether or not I see it as staunchly anti-union or secretly pro-union, I don't know. Maybe somewhere in the middle. I didn't really think about that. I'm just like, yep, this is the world of the movie, and this is what's happening. And I think that the reason why it does work so well, Timo, to what you're saying, and even with a political perspective that you disagree with, you're able to really become enraptured by the stakes that they're placed in, is that you can really feel the presence of the mob everywhere in this. You're seeing these people like slink around in alleys and like turn their eyes downward as like someone else is getting beat up, because they just know that they don't have a chance otherwise. And all these guys standing outside as they're not getting paid or don't have a chance to get paid and saying, come on, man, I have a family to take care of. And they throw the coins and everyone scrambles for them. Like, there's so many of these moments that I think make this world feel like dour, like just incredibly dour. Like, basically everyone's in a shitty position in this movie because they are. And like, it does give it a unique feel of, yep, this has been going on for so long that no one even tries to think of what they could do differently. It's so sad. And so when Terry like hobbles his way across and goes to work for the first time, as we've been saying, is like finally a spark of hope. But you don't really like feel that spark of hope too much in like the other guys, because like they don't know if this is really gonna like lead to anything. Like I feel like there's a like almost, even though it's a super positive ending in terms of energy, there's like a sour note to it of like, these guys have been stuck in this rut for their entire adult lives, and maybe even, a generation back or whatever, that who knows if this is going to actually change anything.
Yeah. Of course, if we do have writing issues, we could maybe take it up with Sam Spiegel over the credited screenwriter, Bud Schulbarg, I think is maybe how you say that, or Schulbarg. Because Sam Spiegel was apparently super overbearing of Bud Schulbarg when he has to write this perfect screenplay, which could have been characters in the writing itself, or could have been maybe some Hays Code things, maybe some aligning with the political narratives of the time sort of things. Maybe why the bad guys are the mob, which are universal bad guys, versus like guys who actually own the shipyard, like you were saying, Timo. Apparently, Sam Spiegel was overbearing to the point where Bud Spielberg's wife woke up at 3:30 a.m. one morning to find him shaving. She asked him where he was going, and Spielberg said, "I'm driving to New York to kill Sam Spiegel," because he was just so overbearing of this entire writing process. But it probably, to an extent, it probably paid off, because this did win Best Screenplay at the Oscars that year. If I can roll into wins and noms again. This won Best Picture as well, obviously. Marlon Brando won Best Actor, as I said. Apparently he was like super, like when Kazan showed him the finished film for the first time, he walked out of the screening room because he thought he did an awful job, but he ended up winning Best Actor. So Ava Marie Saint won for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Spiegel apparently made the call to run her in Supporting Actress, and it paid off because she won. She probably would, even though her role was technically a lead by specifications. Elia Kazan won Best Director. It also won Best Black and White Cinematography, Best Set Decoration, Best Editing, and it was nominated for. We got 3 supporting actor nominations in this movie. Lee J. Cobb, Carl Malden, and Rod Steiger were all nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Impressive. That's the entire ensemble cast that I talked about, all nominated for their acting roles.
Everyone was nominated here. Super crazy. So yeah, great performances, and the Academy got it right. And of course, Leonard Bernstein was nominated for Best Original Score.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I do have one last bit of just interesting tie-in trivia. For in the context of where this movie falls in the Quest for the Bestest series. So if you want me to read that out while we pull up the score sheet, unless anyone else has anything to say.
Any final points?
Not personally.
Okay.
So apparently there was Elia Kazan had a real tough time getting Marlon Brando to sign on board for this film. But Elia Kazan, he was a crafty little guy. Of course, he did squeal to the House Un-Americans Activity Committee, so he was a crafty little man.
What do they call? What do they call like rat? They're like ratting it out. What was the other one? The other like term they used in the film? I don't remember either.
I don't remember either.
They call him cheesy.
Oh yeah, Elia Kazan.
Something else I was watching.
nibbling
on that cheddar, I think.
So Elia Kazan came up with a little ploy to get Marlon Brando on board. He appealed to Marlon Brando's pride as an actor. He had Carl Malden direct a scene with an up-and-coming actor from the actor studio playing the Terry Malloy role. So and then they figured that that Brando, competitive as he was, would not be eager to see such a major role handed to some like green behind the ears screen heartthrob. The ploy worked. Brando did end up signing on to the role because he's like, oh my god, they're gonna give it to this schmuck, this new guy on the scene. And unfortunately, the actor Paul Newman did not get the role. He was the green behind the ears screen heartthrob that they used in the scene. So just a little interesting coming off of The Sting last week.
Yeah. In time, Paul. In time, you'll get there.
Just bide your time.
Okay. Should we give this film a score?
Let's do it.
I've got a number in there.
3, 2, 1. Doosh. Okay, we've calculated it with a small and increasingly amount of difficulty. The computer is really not helping us figure out where this film goes, but it's got an average score of 8.4, and that means it's going at place number 28 on our list, sandwiched, I guess, on top by The Best Years of Our Lives, then on The Waterfront at place number 28, and then below it at place number 29, Argo. And the point breakdown is, starting from top to bottom, 9 from me. Abram gave it a 8.7. Tanner gave it an 8.2. And then Tucker gave it a 7.8. So anyone have any particularly strong notions about their score?
No, not particularly. I mean... This kind of reflects what we said at the beginning, but yeah, I mean, I've raised my score a little bit. I think thinking through the characters and the writing and especially the cinematography and stuff that we talked about and the score, obviously, uncontroversial to say that On the Waterfront is a good movie.
Tucker, I wish you hadn't changed your score because I only like this segment if we get to litigate a tie.
It's a great point. Yeah, sorry, I should have dropped it.
We were so close because there's so many 8.3s, so many 8.5s.
So many better movies than 8.3. Yeah.
That's just how the list works
Oh,
out, Tucker.
boys.
It's just how it goes. Okay. Well, I think then that means we've got a spin, right? That's all we've got left, right?
So we got
As
left to do.
usual.
As usual. Well, a tenor, lead me off when you're ready.
All right. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital? Is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And you can see it as clearly as I can. Wheel's deal is the number 14. Tucker, what is that? What film is that going to be?
Tucker, what the hell is that?
What the hell is going on? Number 14 brings us to the grand old year, just 2 years removed, of 1956. We're going to be watching a movie from Michael Anderson, starring David Niven. Cantinflas?
Somebody Cantinflas.
Somebody named Cantinflas.
Oh.
Finlay Curry, Robert Morley, Charles Boyer, and down there, if you scan, you got Frank Sinatra, Buster Keaton, Marlena Dietrich, Peter Lorre, John Carradine, all sorts of classic names. John Gielgud, Cesar Romero.
These people at
We're
the
gonna be
bottom of the
watching-
cast list?
They're not at the top. Yeah,
Oh.
we're gonna be watching Around the World in 80 days at a snappy 3 hours and 2 minutes.
Oh, god damn
boy.
it. We've been avoiding these long ones for a while now. We've been dodging the bullets of these 3-hour 1950 or 1940 to 1960 movies, but we're back, baby. We're back
We
with a
are
vengeance.
back. Quest is rightfully in its spot. Quest's
Yeah.
spot is
Where it
at the
belongs.
3-hour movie. Well,
I'm
boy,
also,
oh
I'm
boy.
also seeing a Shirley MacLaine in here, a Charles Coburn.
So all
Don
these
McClane
all
in
these
there?
super actually famous people are not like the stars of this film. They're towards the bottom
Tanner,
of the list.
I actually implore everyone to go to the letterbox page for Around the World in 80 Days and see how stupidly long the cast list is for this. I've never seen a longer cast list in my entire life.
Damn. Well,
That
all
that
right.
has to mean something. That has to mean something
means
for
it's
this
better.
film. Have you any
More
of you seen it
characters,
before?
better movie. No.
No.
Okay, well
It's
then
on
we,
think
HBO
I've-
Max though, easy to access.
Yeah,
That's
I think
right.
I've seen a remake of this film, like a maybe like a Disney remake at some point, but
My HBO Max subscription lives to see another month.
there you go. There you go.
Well,
Well,
there we go.
something.
Around the World in 80 Days. It won't take us that long to get to the next episode of Quest for the Bestest, though. Stick around for next week. We'll be talking about that film with all fresh eyes. Many of us saw the film this time beforehand, saw On the Waterfront. We rewatched it.
We all saw it before the recording.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so. Some of you are
We're
lying.
gonna switch it up
I
next
can
week.
tell. We won't watch the movie and we'll just talk about it.
Yeah.
No,
God.
those are falsehoods. I jest. We will all watch the movie and we'll come back and report with thoughts and findings and opinions. That's what we do here on the Quest for the Bestest. Thank you for joining me to talk about On the Waterfront. I really enjoyed it. We will be back next time. And until then, peace. And for all of you in England,
Oh, they do it that way?
no, that's this. It's the same
Oh.
thing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I watched some dude do it to some other guy in the bar a while ago. Oh, show
Did you get
off.
a fucking faint though?
What?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Whoa, it just keeps
Jesus.
going.
Oh my god. Oh Jesus.
Oh, hold on. That froze my page. It froze my page when I clicked open. Oh, wow.
I told you, bro.
Dude, it's
All right, how many of these are
Oh, well, that's because
uncredited?
they're putting like
Of course, they're
it's
probably
uncredited and
extras.
they have extras on the
This has the
the most popular. Did you see the most popular review? For better and worse, easily the most British movie I've ever seen.
Yes.
There we go.